Hi guys, Ashley here from the Woodland Wisp, and today I am decorating a journal cover. So this is an 8x6 hardcover journal. I'm doing an ocean themed background, and I will be using this beautiful polymer clay dragon eye that I made in a previous video as my centerpiece. Now I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing with this today. I have explored several options for texture and embellishment, so I'm just going to start putting things together, and I will leave a full list of my tools and materials in the description box. So the first thing I'm going to do is trace my dragon eye right here in the center of the cover where I want it. We're not going to be gluing it down until later, and because it is the largest and heaviest piece that I'm using, I really want it adhered directly to the journal cover itself. So I am just going to outline it here and then avoid that area while I'm building up my background textures. And now I've got some white glue, and I am just going to begin spreading this over the cover, again avoiding that center area. And I am using tissue paper for my base texture, and I am going to just crumple it up and then begin applying it in strips to these glued spots. And you want to kind of scrunch it up as you're laying it down so that we can keep some of that wrinkled texture. Now I chose tissue paper for a base because it's flat and it will be easy to build other textures over. And once it's painted, it provides a really nice background for water-themed pieces. If you don't have tissue paper, coffee filters, newspaper, or even paper towels will give you a very similar texture. And I am just using some white glue diluted with water to touch up the surface here. And I am going to continue that wrinkled texture all the way over the rest of the cover here and along that binding as well. And once this piece is dry, I am going to replace my dragon eye here, and I have decided to use egg carton for the texture around the eye itself. I have used this before in other pieces to make stone type texture, which I think is very similar to coral. And I am going to be tearing this into pieces and then using them kind of like scales around that eye. And I am going to arrange these in kind of a diamond shape between two opposite corners. So I'm going to start by outlining the eye and then just working that texture out towards those corners. And once you get those pieces placed how you want them, you can begin gluing them down. I think I'm going to add a few extras around the outside corners of that eye because it looks a little bit thin. This is what it looks like, and now I've got some texture paste here that I have thickened up with some table salt, and I am going to be using this for a sand type texture. And I am applying this kind of thick here along the edge of that egg carton texture. And now I've got a toothpick, and I am laying this on its side and just using it to scrape that texture paste out. And I am moving in all different directions along that edging. And I am going to continue that texture all the way along both sides of that center. Here it is, and now I'm just adding a little bit more of that sandy texture in some of those wider gaps between those scales. Here is that sandy texture, and now I've got some kind of netted ribbon here, and I am just going to be using 2 small squares of this. I'm going to be using them on the outside blank corners. And I am using E6000 for this, which is very thick and tacky, and I just need a thin layer of it. So I am going to start with a little dab on each corner, and if you just moisten your finger a little bit, you should be able to spread that out nice and thin without making a sticky, stringy mess. And now I'm just going to place my ribbon pieces over these corners and set that aside to dry. And after it's dry, I will trim them down around the edge there. And now we're going to be using string to make some seaweed type vines. So this is just white glue and water, and I've got some very thin strings here. This is just size 3 yarn that I pulled apart, and I've got 4 of them, but you want to keep them in pairs of 2 when you soak them. And once they are good and soaked, you're gonna pull out 1 pair at a time. And I am just folding this in half, and you want to put the folded end on the corner of the journal with the other 2 ends running along the sides. And then we can pick those up and pull those strings apart. And I am just running them. You don't want them straight or uniform, you know, so curvy but wandering, if that makes sense. And I am going to do that with both of these strings and the other 2 on this corner, and I am going to repeat the same process with the opposite corner as well. Here are those vines, and that is it for my base textures. The next step is paint, and my vines here are still a little bit wet, so I am going to paint the center of the piece first and allow those some time to dry. Now our dragon eye is blue and purple, and we are going to be using some very similar colors in the center here over all of that egg carton texture. So I am going to remove the dragon eye. I am starting with this cool blue, and I am going to brush that over all of that egg carton texture, so that entire center area, corner to corner there. And now I've got this award blue, which is a much darker shade, and I am using that just on the outside edges of each one of those egg carton pieces, kind of blending it in with that lighter blue. And next I've got purple iris, and I am using that in those cracks in between those egg carton pieces. So just in those flat spaces and along the edge. This is what that center looks like, and my strings are dry now. So I am going to go back to that cool blue, and I am just dragging that out along the edges of that center over all of that sandy texture towards the opposite corners. And this color is Aquamarine, and I am going to be fading that out on each of those unpainted corners. Here it is, and now I'm going to highlight those sandy areas with some metallic bronze. So again, I'm starting along the edge and just kind of dragging that color out over that sandy texture. And I'm also going to highlight those areas in the center and some of those larger cracks where we added that sand. And I am highlighting the center area here with the same mica powders that I used on the dragon eye. So this is violet that I'm running over all those purple areas, and then brushing some pure blue just over the centers of those egg carton pieces. Now I highlighted this one opposite corner off camera because I wasn't sure what colors I was going to use, and I am going to go ahead and just do the other side the same way. I went with this FolkArt metallic. This is blue sapphire over these cool blue areas here, and then this is another FolkArt paint. It's a color shift green that I'm using on the corners to highlight that aquamarine. And those vines I painted with this dark Christmas green, and I think it really helps to kind of bring them to the surface. So I am going to go ahead and get this other corner done, and then we can glue down our dragon eye and start adding the rest of our embellishments. Here it is, and I am pretty happy with the color on this piece. Now we can finally add our dragon eye, and I have some smaller embellishments as well. I am using E6000 again, and I am just gonna spread that all over that center area here and place my eye. Now I think I did a really great job of kind of matching the colors here, but I am not happy with the transition in the front. It looks great on the top and the side, and then we have this hard line that I hate. So I am going to mix up a little bit more of that texture paste and salt and use it to make that line go away. Here it is, and I just piled that texture up along the edging and then scraped it down into some of those cracks. And you can see that it makes for a much smoother transition between those textures. Now for smaller embellishments, I am going to start with some clay starfish. I do have a video on my channel for these, and I will leave links in the description below for all of the clay pieces that I'm using today. I have 3 of these, and I am just going to run them right up along the center of this piece. And now I have some little clay anemone type pieces, and I don't know what they are, but they look really great in groups and pairs. And I don't have a lot of these, so I am going to put a group of 3 on the corner of the eye and use a pair on the bottom and the top. Next, I've got some little clay barnacles that I made, and I am just going to be placing those kind of randomly along that center area from corner to corner. The last thing I want to add to the middle here is some of these light blue rhinestones. These are the same ones that I used on the dragon eye, and I am just going to be using different sizes and placing them randomly along that center section. Here is that center. I love the way it sparkles, and I am going to be highlighting these embellishments as well, but I want to get these 2 blank corners embellished first. So I have 2 larger clay shells here, and I didn't make these. They were made from a mold, and I am going to put one on each corner. And then I have several, these are just miscellaneous clay pieces, some small shells and beads. And I am going to be using those to fill in these corner areas next to the shell. And then I've got a whole bunch of these little suction cup type pieces that I will be using to fill in those blank spaces and running some of them up along these vines as well. Here is the finished piece, and you can see that I just kind of clustered those smaller elements together there on the corners. I went with candy pink and pale yellow for my clay shells, and I highlighted everything with some FolkArt metallic in white pearl and orange mica powder. I also continued that base texture and paint around the binding and the back cover, and I finished everything with a thin layer of satin Mod Podge. That is all for today, guys. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. And again, I will leave a full supply list and links for all of those clay pieces in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.